Obviously, Ted, we're 8 hours behind you, so it's getting close to your bedtime.
Carlton just asked the question of whether Ted's there on vacation and I'll just say, just to be very clear for the record, he's not there on a taxpayer-funded research mission, just so everybody is totally clear. I'm not sure if Carlton, that was your question, but just to be clear.
That's a confident candidate, though, to leave in the middle of an election cycle.
So said by the mayor of North Salt Lake.
No, I was just genuinely wanting to know if Ted was ruining his vacation and for his loved ones by being on the meeting.
No, this is exactly where I want to be.
Okay, well, we appreciate you joining us from a long distance. I'd like to welcome everyone out to the Regional Growth Committee. And this is Thursday, October 19th. And the time is, specifically, it looks like it's 9:48. Again, we want to welcome everybody. We will have introductions around the table. Andrea will read those members and alternates attending online. So I'd like to start on the right-hand side of me. If we can go ahead and just give us your name.
Rosie Hernandez, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Jordan Chandler, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Carlton Christensen with the Utah Transit Authority filling in for Beth Holbrook.
Lauren Palmer, Mayor Harriman.
Brian Horrocks, City of North Salt Lake.
Andrea Pearson, WFRC.
Andrew Gruber, WFRC.
Bob Dandoy, Roy City.
Apologies, not paying attention. Laura Hanson, Governor's Office of Planning and Budget.
Laureen Kamalu. I have to always think about this. I come from Davis County, but I'm here representing Utah Association of Counties. And I'm a non-voting member, which is a little known fact.
Mike Sopchak, WFRC.
Jory Johnner, WFRC Long Range Planning Group.
Eric Gibson, Better City.
Marsha White, WFRC.
Linda Johnson, Citizen.
Chrissy Dahlberg, WFRC.
Seamus Gueda, WFRC.
Lauren Victor, WFRC.
Miranda Jones Cox, WFRC.
Byron Head, WFRC.
Michaela Jordan, WFRC. Meg Townsend, WFRC.
Julie Bjornstead, also Wasatch Front Regional Council, Long Range Planning.
Hugh Van Wagenen, WFRC.
Jaron Tavs, urban ecology student at the U.
Okay. We'd like, if we can, those who are online, if you go ahead and introduce yourself online.
Let's start with Commissioner Bolos.
Yeah, Commissioner Bolos, Sharon.
Commissioner Bolos, Weber County.
Thank you, Sharon.
Ryan.
Ryan Beck with Envision Utah.
Okay.
Councilman Thomas.
Kendall Thomas, Twilla County.
Commissioner Harvey.
Jim Harvey, Weber County.
Commissioner Van Tassel.
Kevin Van Tassel, UDOT Commission.
And Councilmember Albert.
Dave Albert, Salt Lake County, District 2.
Okay. Andrea, could you just confirm that we do have a quorum?
Yes, for the record, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you. And thanks for joining us this morning. What a wonderful day to be out. And we appreciate the sacrifice you're making to come here instead of enjoying that great weather we're experiencing. I'd like, if I can, just have one action item as we begin. The minutes from the Regional Growth Committee meeting held August 17th, 2023. Is there any comments or questions or corrections associated with those minutes? Okay, hearing none, then do I have a motion then to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
That was
Kevin Van Tassel.
Thank you, Kevin. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Now we have a public comment period. Is there anybody would like to make public comment to this group? If you do, will you just ask for your name and your organization? No public comments? Okay, let's go ahead and move to the chair report. I'd like to begin, if I can, talk about the Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. Now, in Utah, we have the first and only one-of-a-kind transportation plan, Utah's Unified Transportation Plan as defined. Now, the Utah Transportation Plan is comprehensive at best. It's just so many integral parts to that. Now, statewide, all transportation agencies and local governments have been involved actively in the development of that plan. Now, the plan is nationally recognized, nationally recognized model for collaboration in transportation planning. The plan was recently finalized and presented to the legislative interim session. I'd like to invite Jory Yarner to tell us a little bit about the new version of the Utah Transportation Plan. Jory, lead the way. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. It's been a little while since I've stood up here in front of you all. At the last time we were adopting the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. Since then, we've been working with all the other MPOs, UDOT, UTA across the state to develop the Unified Transportation Plan. Reminder, similar to our Regional Transportation Plan, it's multimodal, roads, transit, active transportation, ties to land use. It's comprehensive, even more than our Regional Transportation Plan, where it looks at not just the capacity projects, but maintaining, operating, and preserving all the infrastructure, transportation infrastructure for all three of those modes across the state. And lastly, on that point, we are still the only state in the nation to do this. Recently went out to Ohio. They were interested in doing this last year and how to coordinate their MPOs and state to do a unified plan. But we've been doing this since 2007. So you may think, things are going great with transportation across the state. It's not by accident. We've been working on this collaboratively with legislators, local communities, all of our transportation agencies, MPOs. So I want to spend a little bit of time, and Jordan, I think, put the unified website or link in the chat, or will, but I'm just going to walk you through the website here real quick. So first of all, the interactive map. So similar to our regional transportation plan, there is a statewide interactive map with all the projects on that plan. Hold on real quick. I need to move my toggle bar. All right, within this interactive map, you'll be able to see all the capacity projects from all the MPOs and the rural part of the state's long-range plan. It has a couple filter functions that are a little bit different than what's in our regional transportation plan. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested in looking at projects and comparing them or looking statewide, Unified Plan Interactive Map is great. If you want to get more detail and down into some of the weeds of projects in the Wasatch Front region, then go to the Wasatch Choice Vision map or the RTP interactive map. So we have a few versions of it, and you'll find a variety of different information. A couple things on this interactive map, and it'll look a little different. I've got a 13-inch screen here, so it filters a little different, but you're able to even sort projects similar to what we've done in the past with mode and phase. You can do it by planning area. So if you're interested in Cache or Dixie or MAG, you're able to do that. And then also by Senate and House districts. And so those are kind of fun filters that you can look at, and it'll highlight where it is, and you can look at all the projects within those interactive maps. You can still click on projects and see project information for those as well. So just wanted to highlight the interactive map component. A couple other things, high level statewide, and we'll start with funding the plan. So we work with the MPOs, UDOT, UTA to create a financial model. It's comprehensive in the fact that it looks at existing revenue sources. We assume new revenue sources, growth rates, project costs. These are all coordinated on a statewide level. And we also summarize those, and you can find that statewide summary here in the interactive map underneath that, the funding. So here's a similar process. Everybody in the state identifies project needs, and then financially constrains them into the same three buckets that we did our regional transportation plan. This, I think you'll find very interesting. There is a total of $153 billion of statewide transportation need. And again, this isn't just capacity. This is maintaining and preserving our existing system, operating our existing system, and maintaining, operating, preserving the future system, the future projects within the regional transportation plans. And this is broken out by road maintenance, road capacity, maintenance, preservation, operations. You can see here transit and their maintenance, operations capacity, and then active transportation with over $8 billion of active transportation needed across the state. Unfortunately, and probably not a surprise, there's only 113 billion only. It's quite a bit of money. We've done a lot of really good work over, like I said, over the last couple decades, working with the legislature, local communities to fund those projects. And you might ask, well, how much comes from those existing revenue sources we've been working with? Well, scroll down the slide. There's about 94, just shy of $95 billion of existing revenue from the sources we have in place now. So if nothing changes and no actions taken, we have $94 billion of the 113 billion. We've made some assumptions statewide that there'll be new revenue sources implemented. This includes registration fees, local option sales taxes, things like that. That makes up about $18 billion of the total revenue, rounds out that $113 billion of revenue we assume. That still leaves us with close to $40 billion of unmet need. You can see down here, we've broken it out by mode and by state and local roadways. So you can see that about $72 billion on the statewide system, and this is maintaining, operating, preserving, and the capacity of the state system. There's a total of 37 billion of local roads, 35 billion of transit, and just over 8 billion of active transportation. And the colors, the red on the colors represent the remaining amount needed. But like I said before, of that 113 billion, that's the green and the gray here. And so the colors line up closely. We have also broken this up and given a snapshot of how much funding and where that funding is coming from. And we picked 2024. So that's next year. This doesn't include one-time funding. This doesn't include federal grants that we might get periodically. This is kind of our consistent funding stream. And so you can see here on a statewide road, overall, there's about 3 billion, a little over $3 billion coming to transportation annually. $1.6 billion, so about half, goes to state roadways. Most of that, not surprisingly, would be state funding, state sources. This would be the TIF, this would be the gas tax, things like that. 32% federal and a little bit local. For local roads, not surprising, right? Most of the local road funding comes from local sources. Over 2/3 of that comes from the local sources. A little bit, about a quarter from the state, and a little bit of federal money for local roads. For transit, just shy of $700 million annually for transit. This is mostly made up of local funding. This is local option sales taxes. I think most of the communities along the Wasatch Front have at least 4 quarters, a little bit over a cent for transit or for transportation. Not all of it goes to transit, be clear there. With some state money, so this is the new TTIF, the Transit Transportation Investment Fund, and then there are federal funds that come towards UTA and their funding sources. And then lastly, active transportation. Wanted to note, this is our first unified plan that we financially constrained active transportation across the state. And it's the right time. The state has active TIF, and they also have the ability to fund the TIF and the TTIF through first last mile or active transportation to fund active transportation, local and state active transportation projects. So
Jory, let me just interject for 1 sec.
Okay.
Because terminology check.
Yes.
Jory said this is the first time we've financially constrained active transportation. But what that means is we've always known that we have active transportation needs, trail needs to invest so people can bike and walk as a real means of transportation. but we haven't had it, the level of sophistication in the planning and financial assumptions for trails in the past as we have for roads and for transit. That work has been upgraded over the past several years. And so when George says it's financially constrained, that means that we have more awareness of what the needs are, where they are, what the funding levels are, what the funding assumptions are that are coming in. And we've made that, incorporated all of that into the into the regional transportation plan and into Utah's unified transportation plan. And what that represents is just that we really do have three modes of transport, well, at least three: driving, transit, and active transportation. And we need to think holistically, like the unified transportation plan does, about all of those modes of transportation. So we've had a leap forward, if you will, in the sophistication of our planning work statewide around active transportation.
Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it. $100 million roughly. And again, this is made up of a lot of state sources, the active tip, the new sources that are just being implemented. This hasn't always been the case. So I want to be clear on this, that if this was a 2014 cut, it would be probably mostly local funding sources that had previously funded active transportation. Now the state has dedicated sources to active transportation there. So back up to the top of this website, want to talk a little bit about quality of life and how the unified plan affects the quality of life of the citizens across the state. So there's a few pull down items here. Hold on. Good health is the first one. We look at safety within our transportation planning across the state. We value that. We work with UDOT and UTA with their zero fatalities. We also look at air quality as part of health. And statewide, emissions are projected to be reduced by 13% between now and 2050 by implementing the Unified Transportation Plan. That is higher in the WFRC area. It's about 28% reduction in the pollutants from mobile sources from the vehicles across the state. Andrew?
And just that's a reduction in emissions, even though we anticipate with the growth we have a significant increase in travel. So that's just a measure of the technology getting cleaner and more people, again, more people relatively speaking, using transit and using biking and walking as a means of transportation.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Another piece of this is better mobility. How are we getting around? And as Andrew just alluded, not only are we driving more, fortunately, by implementing the unified plan, we'll be spending less time in behind the wheel or the windshield of your vehicle. Almost 6 fewer days, not hours, not minutes, 6 days across a year per household, right? Setting in a vehicle. So we're getting around better with our transportation plans. We're also, as made mention and Andrew talked about, we've elevated active transportation. The Utah Trails Network is an effort that UDOT is currently looking to implement and plan a network statewide. Think of it as the freeway system of the bike network. So work with UDOT on developing that system. And then lastly here, well, not lastly, connected communities or stronger economy, my bad. We look at economic impact within the Unified Transportation Plan, and the $113 billion that we have projected to be spent on a transportation system between now and 2050 provides almost a 2-to-1 return on investment. We'll be, the GDP goes up, generates about $250 billion worth of revenue for that. And it creates 250,000 jobs related to construction, and then the jobs that those construction companies and the businesses they support between now and 2050. So it's a really big impact, not only getting around, but the impact to the citizens here and the jobs that they can have. This just shows a little bit about job access. We go down a little bit here on roadways within 20 minutes, but our transit goes up pretty significantly, access to jobs on our modes. But you can look at all the different agencies across the state. Population nearly doubles. And oh yes, and then lastly here, we connect communities. So we're not the only ones in the state that has a Wasatch Choice Vision. We have that Wasatch Choice Vision. Cache and Dixie have created visions for them. The state works with local communities outside of the urbanized areas and connects transportation to the land uses. And we're all, collaboratively looking at that. And so I think everybody has on the table, and if you're not here, swing into the WFRC offices. There's a trifold pamphlet that has all the information, QR, it has some of the human side discussions on them. So Andrew's showing them on the site out a little, if you hopefully can see that. With that, open to questions. Happy to answer any of those, or I'll hand it back to you, Mayor, for the rest of your chair report.
Please, questions?
You mentioned, Jory, that we're still a rare state that actually has a unified transportation plan. Any sense of how that's looked at, like from a federal perspective or nationally in your interactions?
It's looked at very favorably. A few plans ago, Federal Highways, the USDOT wrote a white paper, and Andrew, I don't know the technical term of it, but they pretty much gave us like it
was cited as a
Best
national model for collaboration in transportation by U.S. Department of Transportation, and it has continued. That was as Jory said, a white paper that was written for advice to communities and regions and states around the country, and then it is continually cited as a best practice. The collaborative planning work we have by USDOT and our federal government partners. It's also been cited by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and others as a model to follow. And while you've given us the opportunity, I would note, Carlton, and you know this as well, one of the things that we've heard appreciation about the Unified Transportation Plan here in our state from many folks, including our state elected officials at the legislature and the governor's office, our business community, and I think Ginger Chin from the Salt Lake Chamber is on, or we're getting her on, that it helps all of policymakers in our state and leaders in our state have a strong sense of what the priorities are long-term across the state on all the modes, so their focus then can be more on how do we generate the revenues needed to address these needs, as opposed to having to use candidly a more politicized process to identify transportation projects. So I think that the unified plan is really well regarded and appreciated in many sectors.
And then I just maybe would add a quick comment. From UTA, our perspective, thanking you to letting us tag on to the tail end of your process to do a deeper dive on the economic analysis of transit. And I think in the light of the results of the study that Laura's group did and their interest in transit, I think we always look at the operational cost or the implementation cost, and we certainly have touched on the economic impact of it. We wanted to better frame that discussion, because there is really a broader discussion beyond just the efficiency of moving or lessening congestion or transportation of people. And I think you see it as you look at the development that's happening in each of our communities. And so having that kind of dialogue and framework, hopefully will be helpful long term.
Carlton, Ted might want to, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, Ted might want to comment on that also. You said, Carlton said, everybody, letting us tag on at the end. I just want to be clear. In terms of the transportation planning, UTA, UDOT, the cities, the counties, the community have been involved all the way along in all of this work. I think, Carlton, what you're referring to is a little bit more on the economic impacts analysis.
Yes.
And adding some specific work
Yeah,
to analyze the impacts of transit on the economy more specifically.
that's correct. And,
Okay.
and taking advantage of both the resource that was doing the analysis as well as making sure those discussions coordinated with this unified transportation plan. Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions? Can anybody
Mr. Chair.
online?
I'll just do a couple of quick comments. Part of the process of putting together the unified plan across agencies is part of what leads us to collaborating closely at every level. And MPO to MPO and MPOs to DOTs to UTA. And it means that we are just dovetailed in our work in a myriad number of ways. The fact that we put this together, and we haven't elaborated on a lot of the nerd details here, but when we put together a unified transportation plan, we have consistent horizon years, consistent assumptions with our financials. We collaborate on being able to understand the benefits statewide. These are just really unique aspects. And it benefits our plans in lots of other ways, putting that collaborative detail together. And I just wanted to note that.
Great comment. Thank you. Please.
Just a comment. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just, in a previous position, I was heavily in the sausage making of these plans. And I just want to acknowledge how much work this is. It is a tremendous effort. And there is a lot of detail and just seeing the evolution of the unified plan over the years, because it started out with really just sort of 4 plans with a common cover. And now it really is unified and integrated and organized around common goals. And so I just want to acknowledge all the hard work that Jory and others have done to pull this together. Also, I just want to highlight how lucky Utah is to have our transportation agencies coordinating with one another on such a great level. I have taken this plan around to various different water agencies saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could do something like this for water in the state of Utah? And there are so many other spaces where this model, I think, could be kind of implement or kind of replicated. So anyways, thank you for paving the way. Great job. And thanks so much.
Great comments. Ring Commissioner.
Yes, thank you. So I also represent Utah Association of Counties on the National Association of Counties Transportation Subcommittee. When we can submit, as members, when we can submit policy proposals to NACO, I send it to Wasatch Front Regional Council. If there's something that they have in mind to be considered nationally, then I take that. And what has been interesting, but it kind of fits with what you've said today, is that I think one of the things that we submitted to NACO, maybe the only thing I personally have submitted, is the policy recommendation to work very closely with metropolitan planning organizations for funding, for federal funding. And I was very surprised that counties across the United States didn't like that. They wanted direct funding of federal funds. And what I learned is that this sort of collaboration in our state and the good work of MPOs is not to think that this happens like this everywhere, and to be really grateful for it. So yet another perspective with gratitude for years and years of collaboration. In fact, that's the thing in the Rural Leadership Academy last week. I'm not rural, by the way, but anyway, it's a nice group, another wonderful collaboration. And the collaboration was touted as the powerful success of government. It must be collaborative. If it's not, it won't be great. So.
Commissioner, that it's such an important comment, and I'll note, as you said, there's in many places in the country, there's competition between transit and roads, between states and MPOs and counties and cities, and folks are not working effectively together. And it's not like it's easy or it's perfect here, but we're committed to collaboration as a principle, and the Unified Transportation Plan is an embodiment of that. Kevin Van Tassel from the UDOT Commission, the Transportation Commission is with us regularly here. Tiffany Pocock, who I think you all know from UDOT, is joining us online. Hello, Tiffany. And UTA and cities and counties and really working together. But I'm just so glad you said that, because we can't take that for granted. We have to be intentional about that collaboration for the benefit of all of our shared constituents and communities.
Thank you. Great comments. Appreciate that. Any other questions for Jory? Jory, any last comments you'd like to make?
No, I appreciate everybody's work on this. I was actually sitting here thinking, we talked about the ROI on investment in transportation. We haven't done an ROI on the effort it takes to do the unified plan. It does take a little bit extra, but we get so much more benefit out of doing that. And talking to Ohio last year with UDOT, we went out there and chatted with them. It is extra work, and it does take more collaboration. And they had a 2-day summit trying to figure out how they could do something like this. And we'll see here in the next few years if they can pull it off or not. But I, again, appreciate everybody's help on it.
Okay. Jory, thank you. Great words. Great program. Continue doing the great work you're doing. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is implementing the Wasatch Choice Vision. Now, the Wasatch Choice Vision is a shared framework for coordinating near and long-term transportation, land use, and economic development activities. If you remember, at the last Regional Growth Committee, we discussed the newly refreshed Wasatch Choice Vision. Now, today we'll be discuss key opportunities and needs to further implement the vision. This agenda item has 3 parts. We'll preview fall workshop organized around the implementation of the Wasatch Choice Vision. What are the shared opportunities that can come from a group of communities coming together? The next one then we'll focus on the economic opportunities, a component of the vision. And after that, then we'll open it up for consideration. Issues we would like to focus on as relate to the Wasatch Vision and potential actions to help address those issues. I'd like to just introduce this concept with Ted. I think he's going to lead the conversation. Ted, I'll turn it over to you.
Mayor, thanks so much. I appreciate that. And this agenda item is squarely in the space of the Regional Growth Committee being the steering committee, essentially, for the Wasatch Choice Vision and the Regional Transportation Plan. And so as the committee that attends to long-range planning and thinking at WFRC, I encourage you to start thinking about, in the midst of this conversation, what are the things that you think that we together collaboratively can do that advances this shared framework. I won't go into any detail reminding you about what the Wasatch Choice Vision is, but if you go to the next slide, and just go to the next slide, thank you. Now to the previous slide. The other previous. There you go. The first 2 items here, the first is the fall workshop preview, and the second is the comprehensive economic development strategy. They will queue up a conversation where you, as the steering committee, will help us think about what we ought to focus on over the next couple of years. And so the first item, groups of communities coming together, thinking about what they have in common as they attend to different elements of the Wasatch Choice Vision. And the second item there listed, the comprehensive economic development strategy, is really what the regional transportation plan is for transportation, within the Wasatch Choice framework. That's what the comprehensive economic development strategy is for economic development. So let's jump into the workshop preview, but just know where we're headed, which is to really get your thoughts on how we move forward over the next couple of years. The next slide, please. Thank you. And I just want to note that as the steering committee for the Wasatch Choice Vision, we're always going to be open to your guidance on implementation. But also just be reminded or know that we operate within a 4-year planning cycle. This year in 2023, we adopted the Regional Transportation Plan. We refreshed the vision. We just heard about Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. The arc of producing that is a 4-year arc that ends in 2027. Know that we will be getting feedback from you as the Regional Growth Committee around actions and process involved with the Regional Transportation Plan, but we will do that starting next year, including with new members. Let's go to the next slide. Now, these workshops, I think that many or all of you have attended these in the past, and they're really kind of unique. You know, I'm a city councilor in North Salt Lake, and I'm trying to think of what are the opportunities where I can get together with elected officials, planning commissioners, key staff, with all of the nearby communities, all in a conversation together. And I think that this is the only opportunity that is quite like that. And so here you're looking at groups of communities that will come together in these workshops. Again, elected, appointed key staff. This also includes county officials, legislators, our UDOT and UTA friends as well. It's a wonderful group. You see Box Elder, North Weber County, November 13th, Southern Weber, North Davis County, November 8th. Morgan County says TBD because it's got to be customized for the wants and needs of Morgan County. Go to the next slide if you would. And South Davis County will be our first one on November 1st. This map with dates is in your packet. And if it for some reason doesn't happen to be, we are sending this out in a reminder, and these appointments have already gone out. Now, let me now turn it to Hugh Van Wagenen, and he's going to introduce this content. We would love to get any advice you have about how to take a special advantage of this key opportunity. Again, groups of communities, elected, appointed key staff, and around this basic question of, hey, we have a shared framework that addresses where we want to go as local governments integrated with regional transportation and economic development, thinking holistically. And then, you know, we all know that the devil is in the details of working through that kind of framework. It's hard work. And let's talk about those challenges and opportunities, frankly. Go to the next slide, if you would. And here is where I'm going to hand the baton to Hugh. And I'll just note right off the bat, perhaps stealing a touch of Hugh's thunder. And also, I would love to invite in Laura Hansen on this. But there's a couple of wonderful tie-ins with this agenda. One is that we're also going to hear what residents think about these kinds of integrated planning questions through their input in guiding our growth. That's an input into these workshops. And then the other is there's this fantastic opportunity of exploring what happens with the Utah Trail Network. And that is a key part of this. Now, sorry, Hugh, if I stole a little bit of your thunder. Hugh's going to walk through just briefly the key components of the workshop, and then we'd love to get your feedback on that before we turn to the second portion of this, which is the comprehensive economic development strategy. Hugh?
Thanks, Ted. And we are absolutely excited to come out and be with you in your communities this fall over the coming weeks. And as Ted mentioned, you know, there'll be a lot of folks at these meetings that aren't as aware of the Wasatch Choice Vision as you folks are and the input you've been able to give us over the years. So we'll definitely do a little bit more of a dive into what the vision is, the elements of the vision as part one of the workshop is the plan. And then get into how do we implement portions of this? And you can see the issues up on the screen there: transportation, parks and public spaces, water and housing in city and town centers. Again, with guiding our growth sprinkled throughout the conversation because it's been good timing for that. It's working, bam. So again, I won't belabor this much, right? Wasatch Choice Vision, you know what it is. We've been talking about it. It's been mentioned an introduction, but just remember it reflects our community's desires and goals. And one of the key things we're going to be talking about in the workshop is how the vision is consistent with what we're hearing from the guiding our growth input and results from across the state. Just a reminder, Laura will correct me if I get anything wrong here as I represent, but this has been a huge effort statewide and really a statewide conversation trying to figure out as we grow, how do we maintain our quality of life? How do we keep Utah a great place to live? And what are some of the actions that we can possibly take collectively to continue that as we, again, absorb all this growth that's happening, both from within and from without. And what's great about the timing of this is really hot off the press, if I can use the term, right? As the results have come in over all this time with guiding our growth. And we'll be able to take that information and for all of the issues that we're going to go through, reflect upon what Utahns have said about this over time, right? What are the key issues and considerations that they put forward? And then be able to discuss it with you all about what are the big ideas that have been put forward and what do you think makes sense to try and implement and what's feasible and practical. And in order to do that, what support do you need to make that happen? We'll be spending a lot of time in the workshop on transportation specifically. That little circle was supposed to animate. I got that totally wrong, so my apologies. And not be so distracting up front. But a good portion of this workshop will be focused on transportation issue and specifically looking at the family-friendly bikeways, right, in our communities. Be looking at the regional transportation plan, what's already planned, and trying to distinguish, as mentioned, the Utah Trail Network. Well, what could be the Utah Trail Network portion of this family-friendly bike network that we have planned out? Meaning, you know, what should the state be responsible for? What can they come in and help with, being the highways or the freeways of the biking network? And then in the yellow there, what are all the things that could be still family-friendly bikeways, but the collectors of the bikeway system, right? That are more the local responsibility in conjunction with the smaller facilities to move forward. So we're gonna have a great activity for you there and spend some time thinking about this with you all. Because the Utah Trail Network is a brand new program coming out of the last legislative session, new division within UDOT, the timing is really right to get our investment down early and correct and build the momentum going forward. And so that's a big reason why we're taking advantage of our workshops and meeting with you and all of your staff and other officials to talk about this because this is a new program and we're all anxious as partners to get it right and get it off on the right foot.
Hugh, can I interject one thing?
Which one? Ted, Andrew?
Oh, well,
Ted,
Ted,
have $5 on you?
Go ahead, Ted, if you were going to, go ahead.
Oh, I'll be brief here. I wanted to highlight how this relates to implementation, and then also wondering if Tiffany Pocock online would like to comment on this before we move off of this particular topic. The regional transportation plan with regard to bicycling and active transportation doesn't work out all the details. It doesn't get into always what is the quality of the facility that we want as we implement it. And so this question of which of these facilities do we want to elevate in quality to a bikeway or even more to a Utah Trail Network is very much about the implementation of Wasatch Choice. And Tiffany, I don't know if you want to add, and then of course, Andrew, I think I jumped in right at the same time as you did.
Thanks, Ted. No, I don't have anything specifically to add, but I wholeheartedly agree that it is not going to be an in-depth analysis of which types of routes are where.
Thanks, Tiffany and Ted. What I was going to say is just for those of you in the room or online, local elected officials, just to make sure it's totally clear. When we do these workshops, we're coming to your area and focusing on your area. So like Mayor Stanger, like when we do the workshop for Davis County, we're not going to be looking at the entirety of the region, right, Commissioner? We're going to be saying what is needed in Davis County. And, you know, Mayor Palmer and Councilmember Alvord, like, you know, that's a different conversation in Southern or Western Salt Lake County. And Commissioner Bolos, the same thing, different thing in Weber County, right, Mayor? So the whole point of doing these workshops, you come to WFRC, and when you're here, we're thinking about the entire region. The workshops are to focus in on your area so we can talk about what is most important in your areas and how to implement the Wasatch Choice Vision in your area. So like have that, we ask you, it's kind of funny. I feel like when you come to these meetings, we say, put your regional hat on, please. When we go to the workshops, you can think a little more locally and focused. That's the point of those conversations.
Great additions. So as Ted said, that's an overview of quick snapshot of the agenda for those workshops. If there's anything you want us to lean into more or be sure to address, it would be great to get that feedback.
Okay, any questions or comments for you? Okay, Hugh, I appreciate the information. I will just tell you, and I'll just make an editorial comment here if you don't mind.
I don't.
It's apparent becomes almost every day I read on the news or hear in the news that simply says we have a conflict between pedestrians and bikes and vehicles. It's a sad moment when we're seeing that continue over and over again. This, in my opinion, Andrew, is really critical. Finding safe passage, okay, for our residents to move freely, okay, across our region and feel comfortable they don't have those conflicts. So if there's opportunities here, I would ask you at your regional level, please, okay, engage. Look for ways by which we can try to minimize those impacts because they exist way too often. And to be honest with you, we got to find a solution. In my opinion, a good plan will lead us to a great solution. Please, Commissioner.
That just reminded me of one thing I was thinking when you were presenting, Hugh, and that is just everyone's great desire to have all of this amazing planning, you know, get all the way down. And I have no doubt that you invite everyone to these workshops. I've been to a workshop years ago when I knew hardly anything about government, and it was fascinating to see the process with the tables and everyone coming together to look at it and talk about it. One thing I think that would help a lot, you might already be doing this, but we elected officials, you know, we come and go, and these are very long range, amazing plans. I've noticed that, and I occasionally bring it up, but the city managers typically have a lot more tenure, and they help our mayors and our councils and and then some other people help our planning commissions if there's a zoning administrator. But those are the kinds of folks, along with electeds and appointed people, along with others who are very, you know, everyone in those positions knows citizens who are just very engaged and love to know what's going on. So to use that network, and especially the people who will have more tenure in all of our communities, to get them to those meetings. I mean, I know you said, you know, Lorraine, you keep bringing this up, so, you know, let us know how to do it, but also you do it. And you know, the county plays a role. We can also invite people, and to really, I think when city officials and county officials like really reach out and invite very specific people from all over a city, all over a county, that it just helps people then show up. So inviting is a big deal, and getting it beyond electeds who come and go.
Commissioner, great comments. You, any closing comments as we move to the next topic?
I'll just say, Mr. Chair, thank you for your comment, specifically thinking about the real safety issues we have out there on in our transportation network for people who bike and walk, and it's very troublesome. And this idea of a family-friendly bicycle network is trying to get at the very core of that and making sure people not only feel safe but are safe as they get around their communities.
Great comment. Thank you. Okay. Marcy, Eric, I think you're going to step up and move to the next level. Thank you.
So if you go back to Ted's slides, that'd be awesome. Next one. Yeah. Yep, that's great. Ted, do you want to introduce that or do you want me to just go forward?
Jump on in, Marcia. Thanks.
Well, thank you for letting us be here this morning. Ted has prepared about 4 slides because I get a little nerdy on this subject. So thanks, Ted, for shortening my conversation. But we just got done with the comprehensive economic development strategy process. Every economic development district, of which we are one at WFRC, has to go through this process that is required by the Economic Development Administration every 5 years. It's very easy to check a box with the Economic Development Administration, meaning they have some very easy requirements for us to get in, do some just easy goals and strategies and just check a box. But we had the opportunity to really focus on the Wasatch Choice Vision this year. And we were excited to do so. It's the right thing to do. And we know that Utah is growing. We just obviously have heard that. But how does what we do from an economic standpoint make sense within our communities? And we know that just bringing jobs or just bringing businesses or retaining businesses isn't exactly always the end goal for economic development. We know that, you know, creating communities that are thriving, that are sustainable, financially sustainable, is the core of what economic development is, or at least we think from a regional standpoint. And so our whole thought process was much different, I think, than previous comprehensive economic development strategies. And I've got Eric Gibson here from Better City, but we're gonna just tell you a little bit. I'm just gonna tell you the 4 key. If I have the button. So the 4 key anchors that we came up with are what we heard from going out with surveys, going out to focus groups, talking about with individual stakeholders. But the 4 key anchors are city and town centers, economic development capacity, human capital, which we know is really huge because of our growth here, and then the diverse business environment. And so we really keyed in on these 4 things. And one of the things that we did differently this time around than the previous times is we really talked about what are the key findings and the key analysis that made this. And I think, Eric, if you just want to quickly talk through some of those things, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. Of course, my screen timed out just as I.
And of course, I've written it down. You can tell the difference between the age groups right there.
Just so as Eric's getting set up, so everybody knows, Marcia White is with WFRC, and she leads our economic development district and our economic development works. And then Eric is with Better City, which is a consulting firm that we brought in to help us develop the comprehensive economic development strategy.
That's correct. And our firm has been really fortunate to work with many of your communities. So I really appreciate the opportunity to work with WFRC on this opportunity. And Marcia was very gracious to give us a lot of latitude. The EDA has some very specific requirements for what they want in the plans, but they do allow for some freedom. And so we pushed really early on, Marcia and our team, to really stretch what a SEDS could be and what it means for the region. And so we're really excited about a lot of the analysis we did and the findings we did and the recommendations that we made within that document. But I wanted to really talk about today about the analysis that we did in particular for the SEDS document and the strategy that we put together and the impact of the Wasatch Choice Vision. Our firm always starts with our policy is to start with a blank document. And we go to the stakeholders, we go to the community members, and we ask them what's going well, what's not working, how things are. And a lot of the issues in these anchors here are from those interviews, those focus groups, and those meetings with individuals. And as we thought about how to tackle all of these challenges that the state of Utah is going through, and in particular this region, we found that the Wasatch Choice Vision not only was a great way to address those issues, but it really is the most auspicious way, the best way that we can think of, because Utah is growing, it's dynamic, and there's a lot of challenges that are happening, especially in terms of land use, transportation, pollution, workforce availability, housing affordability, and the Wasatch Choice Vision, when you really look at it, not just from a theoretical standpoint, but from how that can be implemented and the impacts that it can have on community members, that's where we really found that this is a great way forward, and it's the best way forward. So there's a couple key points in analysis that I wanted to highlight today. And the first is transportation, which I won't touch very much on that just because of how much has been discussed already, but amen and amen to all that analysis, the economic impacts that UTA helped put together. We did our own analysis using the transit area zones that Wasatch Choice has and looking at the future commute times. And there was a statistical correlation between those two, where the more of a center a particular zone was designated, the lower your commute times were expected to be. And that was really impactful. And then we looked at housing and the opportunities there. If you look at the Wasatch Choice Vision and the way that it addresses housing needs, that is the best way in order to make sure that there's a good housing future for my children, for your children, for your grandchildren, et cetera, is thinking about how people interact with their places and where they can live within that. The next one is looking at pollution and the impacts there. If we are able to pull together centers, which is essentially bringing amenities and jobs and workforce and housing into a closer urban area, then it allows people to have shorter commute times. They don't need to take a car 40 minutes if you're in Tooele from where you live to where you work, right? If you're in Morgan, having to travel through that canyon, we're thinking about how to bring all of those things together so people can really benefit from all of that. And then finally, in terms of the economic impacts, in having all of those things clustered together provides for economic mobility for people who normally wouldn't be able to access jobs, access amenities, single parents who they need to find a daycare and then figure out a way to get all the way to work and have to transport all between that. It allows them to have more opportunities. It allows them to have more flexibility in their work. And then of course, if you can allow that, then they can have better jobs. They can move up the ranks of the ladder. And so you can have more economic mobility. And then finally is sustainability and resilience, economic resilience. If you are investing in a diverse land use pattern and a diverse options for housing and for workforce, then that allows the community to be resilient to economic shocks. If you are just a single industry, single housing type, and those preferences change or there's a demand shock, supply shock, then you're out of luck and you have to figure out how to respond to that. Having a diversity of all those types allows for greater resilience, allows communities to be more dynamic in responding to those issues.
We picked the right consultant. I just wanted to quickly show you a couple of, so as every plan has, we have, very identified actions. So identifying, the benefits of the city and town centers and then providing those resources for those centers. And then we go down into the next level of which we have recommendations for those. And so one of the things that it does for us, for I was gonna say my team, me and our community and economic development team, is to actually have a plan to actually help step through this and make sure that we are moving in a direction and giving us some direction. And then ultimately, we will have a dashboard that you can, we already have one that's already created, but we'll have a dashboard that will show things like, is there a reduction in commute times? You know, it was very important from Jory's, you saw that, it was important from Jory's unified plan, but we also want to make sure that we are doing the things that, do we have a reduction in commute times? Do we have an increase in workforce and labor participation? Those kind of things. So yeah, that's all I have. Ted, if there's anything you want to follow up, or Andrew, I could spend hours on this, so.
Marcia, I think this is great. And I think this is also a good segue into the last part of this agenda item, which is to have a discussion and hear how you, the Regional Growth Committee, would like us to move forward collaboratively on implementing the plan. And so you think about, through the SEDS, a couple of the things that they said as they thought about implementation is they said, well, you know, we need to better understand the economic benefits of centers. We need to provide economic development resources for centers, and then they drilled down. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that you could throw out here in this last part. But I don't mean to step on this particular piece if there's comments or questions on the SEDS itself.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Anybody have any comments or questions they'd like to share? Please.
Just a couple thoughts. First of all, just a compliment. I had the honor of chairing the first Wasatch Front Economic Development District years and years ago. It's clearly improved far beyond anything I contributed, but and I think it's nice to see how it's evolved. But the second part of that is, I think there's probably some opportunities for communities in meeting these goals. And I was thinking back probably a couple decades ago now, but and I keep pointing behind me, but when the Gateway area was developing, one huge piece was cleaning up some of the environmental remnants of the former railroad corridors that went through that area. And one of the key funding pieces of it actually came through a grant that was on the economic development side, and not through the typical transportation or other kinds of funding things. And you know, now 2 decades later, if I drive through there, there's probably, you know, $1.5 billion of investment that has taken place there. And I think we all have some communities, sometimes it's greenfields, but other times it's just trying to get past a difficult hurdle. And so this tool, you know, it's not one that's typically used, to be honest, in the area. And I think it has more potential than we sometimes give it credit for. And so I think that certainly the plan set creates a great segue into that opportunity.
Great comment. Okay. Laura, you have a comment, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I've worked with Marcia a little bit on a statewide version of the SEDS. And when we first started that project, it was pretty clear that the SEDS documents in most regions was kind of just a check the box sort of responsibility. It was like, okay, we have to do it in order to get the federal funding. So we'll put a plan together. But I am so encouraged to see this, because I feel like we are evolving and transitioning out from that to having tools that are really useful and have the right kind of guidance in it to actually use it to guide our economic development decisions as a state and as regions. And so anyways, nice job on it. I appreciate having an opportunity to kind of take a look at the draft of it. And you've done a good job. And I really hope that we can continue to be more intentional as we're thinking about economic development and using these tools. So.
Okay, great comments. Anybody else like to share a thought? Anybody online? Let me just make a comment if I can. Economic development, I think, is one of the most critical components of any municipality, and I can speak for a municipality. We certainly would argue that says that, you know, driving our revenue requirements, okay, from property tax may be easy, politically difficult, but certainly easy for a decision. In my opinion, it's not the way. We have to build a strong economy. And the simple things, and I think Ted alluded to this when he made a comment, we've got to do the deep dive. We've got to look, how can we make that happen? And to be honest with you, Marcia, as we talked briefly, it can be as difficult, and what some of the challenge would be is how do we deal with parking? It seems like the most easy conversation to have, but parking can very well be a deal breaker in terms of how we get a really effective economic development element going. So as this plan evolves and you give us the tools that we can really look at, even the simplest things can make all the difference in the world. So it's exciting to move this from a draft to reality. And so, you know, I only encourage that we take a look at all of the options, everything that we can to help all of us, okay, within this broader community to be able to find ways to be very effective in terms of implementing economic development. It's critical. I think it's so important. And I could not be more pleased, Andrew, in terms of us moving in this direction. Look forward to what comes out of this, and certainly a whole lot of input. So thank you again. Great effort.
Mayor, can I note, presumably it's not by accident you mentioned parking. We're going to talk a little bit about parking a little bit later in the agenda. I also just want to say one of the things that I'm thrilled about with regard to the comprehensive economic development strategy is that the team looked at the Wasatch Choice Vision and did the analysis. And just to put a finer point on this, you heard this already, but I want to make sure this is coming through loud and clear. The centered development strategy in the Wasatch Choice Vision, each of your communities identifying the places in your community that's a city and town center and investing that and making that a thriving place for people to live, work, and play. That in of itself is a critical strategy for long-term sustainable economic prosperity within your communities and regionally. That's what is borne out by the sets. So it's not just good for traffic congestion. It's not just good for housing affordability. It's not just good for air quality. And I see Bryce Bird from the Division of Air Quality snuck in, and he is like, for some reason, is refusing to come to the table. I don't know. But it's also really critical for, and a key strategy for all of us to employ for having that sustainable economic development and prosperity. And it's a great connector. We thought that was, I just want to be clear, we thought that was the case, but we asked Better City to do the independent analysis, and they have come back. And if you want to dig into it more, it's part of the work that's in the sets. So thanks.
Great comments. Great comments. Again, thank you. Great presentation. Which leads us to the next topic, which and there's great topics taking place today, so it's good to basically have that. But I just want to basically do a little bit about the parking policy modernization.
Mayor, do you, if I could, can we do a quick discussion on implementation with the Regional Growth Committee before we jump into the parking? We have
go ahead and start that conversation, Ted. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that, Mayor. So here's what we've got. We've got 2 Slido questions. The Slido is not the conversation. The Slido is the way to begin the conversation. It's just a way to flush out ideas like birds in a meadow. And so there's 2 if you have a second to go to slido.com and put in that number, you can use that QR code. And then I think that information is on the next slide already.
Right. So Ted, just to make sure everybody's clear, this is the participation point. So everybody pull out your phones.
Yeah,
normally we don't tell people
right.
to pull out their phones in a meeting. And then online, same thing. I'm looking at everybody online who doesn't have their camera on and doesn't have their mic on, but I know you're paying complete attention to this meeting. Will you go to slido.com and type in that number, or just use the QR code? We've just got a few Slido questions for you. And if anybody has any trouble,
there's
let
only
us
2
know.
of them. Right on. So let's go to the first one while people are pulling that up. And that information is still there on the left. And so you don't have to pick one of these 6. You can hit number 7 and then just be prepared to tell us what number 7 is. What issue that relates to the Wasatch Choice Vision should we focus on in the next year? Now, remember, Wasatch Choice has these key strategies: city and town centers, housing choices, transportation options, parks and public spaces. Those are the topic areas essentially of Wasatch Choice. And how do we advance those things? By integrating transportation, land use, and economic development. So it can it's sort of this space of the physical form of the places that we create or conserve, and all of those components that can come together. So let me open it up right as you are
Ted,
doing
pause
this.
for 1 sec.
Yes.
Most people have used Slido before, but anybody, I'm just looking around the room here. Anybody need technical assist? Slido technical assist? Everybody online? Councilmember Thomas, Commissioner Bolos and Harvey, Commissioner Van Tassel, Councilmember Albert. I'm just saying the people's names out loud who we can't see and don't have their cameras on or their mics on, just because we want your input. Calling you out so we get your input. Okay, thanks, Ted. Go ahead.
Now, we have attempted to focus on options here that we hear residents really talking about, or that are a big part of Wasatch Choice. Nobody has picked the other option, but let me just ask explicitly, does this list of the 1 through 6 kind of get at the space that you feel like we should be operating within collaboratively as the council, the Wasatch Front Regional Council? Okay, now let's reflect on the results. So housing generally, no surprise, number one, we have a big housing affordability challenge that we all know about. City and town centers, we've talked a lot about that. Now you've got transportation implementation and funding, number 3, parks and open space 4, tied now with economic development, and water 6. Now we know water is a big issue. Does anybody want to comment on why you ranked things this way? Does anybody want to share your thoughts on, like, if this is guiding our work, why did you pick what you picked? I'm looking at the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please give us your thoughts on that.
I actually had chosen city and town centers. And the reason I chose it is because if you create the focal point of the place, then the housing often follows it. The housing will often respond to the market. Not always, certainly not in the affordable category. And so getting that basis of the place, I think, could move that conversation along and address the second piece of that. And the only other piece that, and if I had done another, but I didn't, that I think is a challenge is labor availability, and transportation plays a role in that. But I think, for the first time in my 25 years of public service, the availability of labor is curtailing economic development or progression.
Okay, great comments. Anybody else like to share? Let me just make a comment relative to that. I too pick cities and town centers as being a focal point, and not housing generally. And the reason why not so much housing generally is that, as you well know, the legislation has pushed a lot of things towards municipalities and counties to look and implement, and we're certainly seeing the evidence of that. I'd like to see that mature. I'd like to see over the next sessions to see all of that's happening and see what the fruit of that effort is going to be. Because I believe, even though we're moving towards that and we probably have more to do, it would certainly give us a good baseline in terms of how we're really doing addressing the housing issues, okay, within at least within this municipality area. But to your point, okay, I think cities and towns are a great focal point because that's personal to me. And I can certainly speak to Roy City. I may even speak to a couple of municipalities, but my issues in Roy City are fundamentally different than we expect to find in Salt Lake City or even Tooele County. They are different, similar, but different. And I certainly would have a big interest in wanting to talk about how we can make the great things that we'd like to see happening in Roy City to happen in other places. And more importantly, how they can collaborate with all the other cities. So I see that to be really, in my opinion, crucial in terms of how we move forward with this effort. Please, Commissioner.
Just yesterday evening, these two good mayors and other mayors were in our Council of Governments meeting, along with the commissioners, staff. We have a fantastic group of mayors in our 15 cities. And one of the things that was on the agenda, or maybe it was added in, was one of the mayors who brought kind of a disheartening comment about housing, and if cities don't start doing better with this, then it's going to be taken over by the state. And so this was pretty sobering and pretty concerning. And Wayne was there from Wasatch Front Regional Council. We had other discussion. Really, it was a good meeting, and with other points on the agenda. But what I said is that in that meeting, I said, Wasatch Front Regional Council does tremendous work, and just putting this together in this meeting, I feel like Wasatch Front Regional Council could be an amazing mediator for the cities in the state. So there you have it.
Great comment. I think we have a comment from Tulla County, please.
Yeah, in Tulla County, we're in a unique situation as we have one way in and north to south. And if you go east to west, it's to Wendover or it's to Salt Lake City. So we have to be able to get transportation in and out. That's our number one big thing pressing us right now. And long-term is water. We do not have surface water. We do not have reservoirs. What we do is drill. And so until we solve our transportation needs and our water needs, that's our stranglehold is those 2 points, is transportation and water. We know the growth is coming from Salt Lake County. We're an overflow, we're a bedroom community. And so those are our real pressing needs that have to be addressed as transportation and water.
Yeah, great comment.
I appreciate
great comment. Anybody else like to share a thought?
And Mayor, as anybody else jumps in on that, and I don't mean to get in the way of that, it might be helpful for us to go ahead and pull up our next and final Slido question. And that just is an open canvas of letting people kind of jump in with words to get at, okay, so if those are some of the focus areas that you'd like to look at collaboratively over the next couple of years, are there some actions that you think we should explore? And you remember from the SEDS, a couple of the actions they talked about were, let's understand the benefits of centers more, and let's provide resources to help in economic development activities for centers. Now, you don't have to get into it like that, but I'm just, these could be studies, these could be communications, these could be working together to understand, this could be planning, kind of opening it up to any thoughts that you'd like to throw out. This is sort of brainstorming fashion, and it doesn't have to be on housing generally, but that was our number one option that you highlighted as a group. So we're kind of seeing these come on in, and if after you type something in, if you want to jump in and elaborate on something that you have shared, that would be great. And Mayor, I don't think we necessarily need to talk through this list in a lot of detail, but I think whatever you generate as the Regional Growth Committee, not just within this meeting, but we will take other thoughts and ideas that you have over the coming days. And then we will report back to you on this and then seek to organize the feedback into a bit of an action plan as we work on implementation collaboratively over the coming months.
Okay, Ted, that's excellent. Thank you. Everybody have an opportunity to weigh in on this? It's a good comment.
Electric or pedal bikes, street widths, cleaning distribution, and last mile delivery fleets. What does cleaning distribution mean? If somebody wants to jump in on that, help cities think forward to future growth. Would welcome an elaboration on that if somebody wants to. Coordinate actions between agencies involved in any plan. Yes, that's always a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's one of here that Andrew and I were just talking about relationships between, development loans on infrastructure improvements in town centers. That's an intriguing comment. Anybody like to make comment on that one? Please.
Was that you, Carlton?
Please.
And where I'm coming from in there is, so often we look for grants. I don't know that you need the grant, but you do need some upfront capital to get over certain infrastructure barriers. Sometimes it's parking, sometimes it's, enhancing sewer lines or whatever to handle the additional demands. And when there's not a clean way to get that generally, and for most communities, they don't have something to borrow from. And so the development community is probably reticent to do that infrastructure piece. And although they will clearly step in there, but there's probably ways to capture that and repay those loans. And sometimes it's maybe just in the municipal bond market, but even bonding can be fairly expensive for a small project. And I don't think there's just a great way to do that unless you have a lot of sophistication.
Yeah, no, great comment. Personally, I never thought that went through. So that was a good enlightening. Anybody else like to share a thought? Please, Bryce.
I would, and Bryce Bird from the Division of Air Quality. So I need to explain my comment, and it is my comment that cleaning the fleet is what I mean is, and that is, as you have more of these centers, you have more and more, rather than having a large delivery center, I guess same thing, but as you move the town centers around, there's more and more delivery going on, both distribution from a distribution center to a retail facility, and of course the home deliveries as well. And as we look at going back to the prior question, I was another, and that was air quality is still very important to me. These all relate to that, but as we look at the transportation sector in particular, we are concerned that especially the diesel fleet is contributing, I guess, a lot more air pollution than what we expect, and in some ways overwhelming some of the improvements that we've made over time as well. So as we look at the transportation, it's not just building the roads and building the centers, but how do we improve the performance of those fleets as well?
Mayor, I said,
Bryce, I was slow on the uptake on that. Go ahead.
Commissioner Bolos, you put a comment in the chat. Do you want to just share what you're thinking, Commissioner Bolos?
Yeah, sure. This is honestly goes back to my prior role as the mayor of a city. And I think that the more we can help cities understand how they impact each other, the better off we are with creating transportation solutions. I think it's easy for cities to, and communities, whether it's counties, cities, whatever, for communities to just be focused on what's happening right there. And it just can cause challenges, I think, for transportation issues when we aren't looking at the bigger picture. So if, finding a way to help city leaders come together and understand each other and each other's plans, I think is beneficial.
Yeah, great comment. Great comment. Okay, other comments or any questions? Do you have anything you want to close up with this?
Just that, here's what we'll do. We will leave this up so that you can keep adding to this for the next minute or two. And then, of course, after the meeting, feel free to send additional ideas. And so even as our next agenda item, Julie starts to introduce that, you can still finish up what you're commenting on here. And unless there are, by the way, unless there are some things that anybody wants to share before we wrap this item.
Okay, that's an introduction. If there's anything else you'd like to make closing comments on. Okay, not hearing any, Ted, I guess we'll move to the next agenda item, but obviously this is a living document and input. And I think Ted's point would be is please continue contributing your ideas as they come forth. Okay, thank you. Great information. Want to talk about the parking policy modernization guide. Parking policy needs to be well understood. And certainly I will tell you, Julie, it's an area I'm just not sure I understand effectively. I mean, I certainly park, but a modernization guide, I'm really intrigued by this one. When we talk about implementing city and town centers, parking is one of the critical details that can make or break a center, hence my comment earlier. Parking takes up a lot of space and can be a big concern for nearby residents. And I've seen that personally in our efforts. In addition, parking dynamics have really changed in the last few years. For all these reasons, Wasatch Regional Council has worked with partners to create a Utah Parking Modernization Guide. I could not be more excited to hear what you have to say, Julie. So
I feel like you
please.
said it all already. So I am a little bummed. I thought I would have like an hour on this topic, but we had great conversation. So I only have like 20 minutes. But yeah, so we talked about the Wasatch Choice Vision and how to implement it. And up here on the wasatchchoice.org website under tools and resources, there's a lot of great, obviously resources and tools that can help you implement the vision and centering. And one of those tools is the Parking Modernization Guide. This was a joint effort between UDOT, UTA, WFRC, Salt Lake County, and MAG, our sister agency in Utah County. Looking at how communities could modernize their approach to parking, why this is important, and then policy options and strategies. So usually when somebody from long range planning is standing up here, we're talking to you about the vision, the future, looking 30 years out on how we're going to grow. We are also capable of looking backwards on how we have grown and how our communities have changed. So this is 4th South in Salt Lake City. You see that some of what you see here has not changed, right? This Jiffy Lube, this one is still there. You can still get emissions tested. I think that the Baskin Robbins 31 is still there, but a lot has changed since the 1980s. We've had the Olympics, which have changed a lot of how we've grown, where we see our transportation corridors growing and housing. And of course, thanks to the good work of Carlton and Laura, we have this amazing transit network. So the way that our communities look and how we get around has changed dramatically. And it's continuing to change, right? In addition to our transit system, Council Member Alford, brought up active transportation, and we have this, sort of robust active transportation network that's getting better every day. Technology has allowed us to book our transportation and pay for it via our phones. And, we buy things online now. We talked about first mile, last mile delivery, and we have about 10 people remoting into this meeting. And most of us do that on a weekly basis as well. So all of these things have changed how we get places, how we use our communities. But one thing that's sort of, shall we say, still stuck in the 20th century is how our cities plan parking. So this guidebook you see on the left, the Parking Generation Handbook, comes from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. A lot of the data that's in here is from the 1980s and the 1990s, and you can see what that looks like. So for each sort of land use type, there's all of these studies that have been done on how much parking is needed. And you can also see in this graphic, those studies are all over the place, but the guidebook gives you sort of an average rate and then kind of picks a number. A lot of communities, and when we do parking studies, when we do development, use this handbook to say this is how much parking a certain new building needs. The problem with that is that it's informed on our municipal codes on our parking requirements. And then a lot of our cities, we borrow from everyone, right? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. So even if you look at the cautions that are in that transportation generation handbook, you can see that they are, no one ever reads this section, but you can see that even they're cautioning that this data is a blend of many conditions and it may not best reflect our local conditions. And that surveys that are done locally are the best means to estimate our parking demand. And yet we don't really use that, right? We use these national standards and then we kind of copy them over and over again. But as we think about our communities, even our individual communities, the region as a whole has lots of different contexts, right? Some of us are more urban, some of us are more suburban, some of us have more mixed uses, we have transit, or we have good active transportation networks. And all of this informs that our demand on parking is changing, not just within the region, but within our cities and our individual neighborhoods. So this has led to situations like this. Thankfully, I don't know what city this is, so I'm not picking on anyone here, but we can see that there are definitely places in a lot of our development patterns today that we need parking, right? No one is saying we don't need parking. We see lots of cars parked, but there's also other areas that maybe have been overparked. And when we start thinking about what that space can be, we've talked about housing, we've talked about the cost of housing. These sort of excessive parking areas or the space that maybe we didn't need can be used for housing. It can be used for parks and open space. It can be used for other things that might help us generate more tax revenue for our communities. And so as we think about—
Julie, just back up one sec, because each parking space increases moderate priced housing costs by about 12%. Can you, this is given that housing affordability is such a key point, can you just elaborate on that just a little bit, please?
Yeah, so when we couple our cost of parking with our housing, or we are saying a lot of times, if we go back, what did I copy on the code? Does it say? Yeah, so here we're saying, you know, for each duplex dwelling, there's 2 stalls per unit for the dwelling unit, and, you know, triplex 2 stalls. And then for this particular one, for any apartments, you know, it's like 1.5 per dwelling unit. And we're not taking into account, you know, the number of bedrooms or who is using the vehicles. And we're also saying that everyone who has a house is paying for this parking. So as parking is expensive can be expensive to build, either by taking land that requires surface parking or building in a garage. That cost is passed on to the housing space. So when we make an assumption that every dwelling unit requires X many stalls, even if those aren't being used, we're still paying for that construction of that parking. Carlton? Sorry, trustee.
No, you're good. Just before I left Salt Lake County, we had a seminar on the cost of free parking. And one of the interesting components to that is not in addition to the cost of actually producing the parking, but on the tax revenue side, for a municipality, the value of the property tax as a parking lot versus some other use was pretty substantial. And if you really put the numbers to it, that excess parking was actually costing you as a city a lot more. And it just, they used a couple examples, but even a small older building that, you know, is moderately leased versus a parking lot, the tax value to the school district and then the city was almost, it seemed like it was like 5-fold, or, I mean, the numbers are real, and we often don't take that into account.
So the other sort of reason to start thinking about this is Kaysville's vision and principles. Okay, good. The animation worked. So, you know, here we think about the vision includes thriving communities, you know, vibrancy, innovation, adaptation. Some of the principles are about mobility and enriching city centers, preserving open space. And so the question becomes, does our current parking policies and ordinances that we have adopted in our communities help us implement our vision? Are they in line with our guiding principles that we've outlined in our general plans? And so when we talk about modernizing our parking, we mean, using data that's collected for our local communities, that's updated, that's reflecting the dynamics that our cities are facing today. Moving away from one size fits all parking, that if that parking works for that community, it also works for us. And looking at the context within our community and acknowledging that our downtowns or our transit supported areas are going to be different than our industrial areas or our commercial areas. So we have produced this Utah Parking Modernization
Julie,
Guide.
so that
Yep.
no, one size does not fit all, meaning one community to another. And then also meaning within the boundaries of a community, like Mayor Palmer, if you've got, certain development patterns in one part of Harriman City, and then, more centered, more dense development patterns in another area, the parking, I think this is stating the obvious, but just want to make sure the point is clear that even one community to another or within a community, you may want to have varied parking standards and approaches depending on the specific context,
That's
right?
correct. Yep. Yeah, so this guidebook is a guidebook and then a tool that can help you enter sort of your development and work through some of the strategies and policies that might work in your community. Is both on wasatchchoice.org under those tools drop down menu I showed you, but also on wfrc.org under studies. So it should be easy to find. In addition, WFRC staff is here to help you think through how this is applicable to your community. We have funding through the TLC program. We've funded parking studies in the past. And TLC also has an ordinance assistance program that can help audit your current parking ordinances, see where maybe they could be modernized. And so both of those are available for our communities, as well as just, having conversations with staff. So if this is something that interests you, feel free to reach out to me and I can help you get started, or you can go solo using the guidebook on our website.
Great comments. Any questions for Julie? Mayor?
One thing that you guys may want to consider, it doesn't happen here in Utah, but in a lot of the other places I've traveled, you can actually do a rental on a parking spot in someone's driveway, in their building, in an office, whatever it may be. So at some point in time, that might be something to consider into your guys' parking plans as an option to kind of do like a VRBO, but for a parking spot.
That's cool.
That's interesting. Yeah. Any other comments? Anything online?
Oh yeah, and I see that Reed is on the call. So I'll just acknowledge that a number of the data that is in this guidebook relies on research that Reed Ewing has done. And
That's Professor Ewing from the University of Utah, just for the record.
he's
Reed, he's
so
Reed. I know
famous,
he's
don't
Reed
feel like
because
I
we
need
love
to-
him, but just so that everybody knows. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. Great information. Okay, action item number 6. I will indicate to you, we're going to move that particular action item into January's meeting. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. That's going to push us to action item number 7 on the agenda, other business, and then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Under other business, is there anything before I offer a thought? Okay, hearing none. I'd like to talk just briefly, and I mean this briefly, about the possibility of moving this particular meeting time from 9:45 to 9:15. Now, there's some good arguments for that. I will tell you from a personal perspective, I use the train and it's convenient. But as the Wasatch Front Regional Council people tell you, I was usually here about a half an hour or an hour early because I want to make sure I'm here. And they seem to accommodate me. But the original intent of putting it at 9:45 would allow anybody who wants to use that particular train system to simply move south or north, okay, to meet the requirements. Not so much of an issue in the morning because the trains are actually moving on 30-minute intervals. But when you get to that 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock, the time moves, trustee, as you will know, to every hour. And so it's not uncommon for me personally to be able to sit either here or at the train station waiting for my next train going north. I think, and I don't want you to take this as personal, but certainly there might be some benefits to this. For us to use the transit process, I find that if this meeting was in fact at 9:15, we can wrap up this meeting in an hour and a half. gives me plenty of time to catch one of those trains on the half-hour note. But more importantly, okay, it may provide, at least for me and maybe for you, that we get tied up in this regional growth committee meetings. It is our morning meeting. And because it kind of stretches sometimes to the noon hour, it also starts consuming our afternoon events. It would be nice if we can consolidate this particular meeting in the morning for all of us, get what we need done, and it allows us time we get back to our offices and back to our areas so that we can basically carry on our afternoon assignments. That's my personal opinion. Certainly, this is not a personal decision. I would ask any comments relative to your ideas starting in January of moving this meeting to 9:15. Thoughts?
I think it's great. And I also really appreciate, I feel like this committee needs discussion. And I love meetings that are only an hour and 90 minutes is great. But like, if we don't have discussion and input in this meeting, we're failing as a committee. So, thank you for the opportunity to discuss and share thoughts.
Anybody online?
Commissioner Bolos said that she would love that adjustment. Oh, and so did Ginger. Oh, and Commissioner Harvey's given the thumbs up. Seems like Ryan, everybody, seems like a consensus is building. Yes? Great.
Okay, I'm not so sure of the formality in terms of making it happen. Certainly was a discussion.
Say to Andrea, please change it.
Andrea, could you go? I like that.
Yes, I will.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, hey, thank you so much. Okay, and please, in the best interest in terms of our transportation opportunities, and I will speak for the trustee Christensen, use the train. I'm telling you, I was here when the Wasatch Regional Council was meeting on the other side of the airport.
Yeah.
And I had to drive all the time. Today, I can just hop on that train, do work along the way, come down, attend the meeting, do my due diligence, and go home. And it's perfect.
It's right there.
Setting.
I mean, it's like 200 yards away. The front runner station.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
I do have one, if I might, one
Please.
quick thing to add. And this is, I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's about our staff. So you know how we talk in Utah as we're the fastest growing state in the nation, and now like approximately 50% of the growth that Utah is experiencing is people moving to Utah because it's such a great place to live. Well, we have more people coming in than moving out, but sometimes people do move out of Utah. And it pains me to say this, but two wonderful members of the WFRC staff are moving back home. Michaela Jordan, Michaela, wave your hand, is in our community and economic development group. And she's, I hate having to say these things, but she's moving back to Maine, back home. And Mike Sobchak, who you all know is our communications manager, is moving back home to Chicago. They're both going to be gone before the full regional council meeting, which is next Thursday. So I just wanted to take this moment to express appreciation for both of them. They've been wonderful contributors, colleagues, and friends, and have dedicated so much talent and effort. And we're really going to miss them. And it's to Maine and Illinois' benefit and Utah's loss. But if you all just join me in a round of applause for Michaela and Mike, please. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. And thank you for your contribution to make this this region such a great place. With that, then, I do have a motion then to adjourn. Oh, by the way, before I ask for that motion, just want to remind you on January 18th, okay, 2024, we will reconvene the Regional Growth Committee. So if you could join us again on that date, and the time of the meeting start based on the agreement would be as 9:15. So thank you. With that, then, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Okay, thank you. All in favor? I think I see some thumbs up on the thing. Thank you. Okay, any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you for your time.